Hi, Patty and Ross. I want to send you a video feedback regarding your email. So, one of the first things we want to discuss is factors that contribute to behavior in dogs, and there's numerous ones. One is early learning, so what this dog experienced during his critical socialization period, which usually runs between about 3, and if we're talking about German Shepherds, sometimes as early as 7 weeks. And the hallmark of the critical socialization period is that dogs will approach a novelty with confidence and curiosity. Once that window starts to close, they become more ambivalent about novelty. Know that when you're dealing with a dog, often you can do all of the right things, but during that year of age, a lot of times temperament and breed-specific character traits can kick in, which I looked back in your consult intake form, and it looks like the behavior started when he was 1, which is when dogs reach social maturity. So you have genetics as a factor, right? Breed-specific tendencies is a factor. Early learning is a factor, which you didn't control. Even stress during pregnancy can affect a dog's future behavior. The other thing is learned experiences, and it doesn't sound like he's had a lot of negative experiences, but know that there's other factors at play. So don't always assume that he had a lot of negative experiences during the first 5 months of his life. It could be genetics, breed specific. It could be during his critical socialization period he wasn't exposed to a lot of adults, and all that stuff can kind of kick in at about a year and a half of age, regardless of what you do. So does that change the prognosis or the outcome, the reason why? No, it doesn't. The only thing we can do is make decisions based on the dog's current presentation. So one of the interesting things when we were talking about managing him was that we always want to have 2 safety measures in place. So example of safety, 2 layers of safety would be having him tethered, as well as maybe an X pen if guests are over. Having a buffer with 2 gates. So if he happens to jump over one, then you've got a second one, especially a tall gate. Could be a combination. I don't like using crates in these situations because if a dog's in a crate and there's humans wandering around, he has no choice and control to move away, which is not ideal. So when you recited kind of what happened, what he told you when you brought him, you put him in the backyard with the frozen orb, the guests arrived, and you noted that he barked and jumped at the gate. So he was already telling you that he could not be successful with direct interactions because he was implementing an offensive strategy to create space because he was uncomfortable. Okay? The fact that he settled is awesome. It sounds like to me you gave him a visual target, which is what I always love. But he was already told you before you even introduced direct interactions that he was not comfortable with the people in the home. So what does this tell us? It tells us that we always want to make decisions about what dogs are telling us. And if he's already implementing an offensive strategy through a barrier when they initially come in, I would not move to unprotected contact, which essentially is removing the barriers and allowing him access to people, because he was telling you couldn't do that. What I would do if the room is not available would be I'd set up 2 layers of safety and keep those 2 layers of safety. I would not have him directly interact with people. The other thing is we have to remember 2 things. Presentation matters. So know that for him, if he's uncomfortable with people seated, having somebody move, especially towards him, is going to be a much more difficult presentation for him, because then people become unpredictable, and we're also involving people moving towards him, which is a really difficult presentation for dogs that are even a little bit uncomfortable with the person. So I think we just we basically pushed him too far too fast. The second thing that we have to remember is if dogs are slightly uncomfortable, know that the amount of time that they're in that situation will typically lead to aggression and behavior. So think about if you're in an environment where you feel uncomfortable, the longer you're in that environment, the more mentally tired you're going to get. So I really like the idea that he was actually comfortable enough to relax and ignore the people when they ignored him. But I would tell you that the longer he was in that situation, the more mentally tired he became navigating it, which more than likely led to regression. So we have a couple options. If you can't, if he doesn't have the skill set to be separated from you, then we need to figure out 2 layers of safety when people come into the home. And I would not remove those 2 layers of safety, meaning direct interactions, until he has the skill set to be successful. And we figure out what is the structured plan that we're going to implement it to introduce him to people in a semi-protected contact first. Okay, so the dog obviously has a capability of learning that people can be safe and predictable, but we need to implement slow introductions. He's telling us he can't do it on the first visit. So let me know if that makes sense to you. I wouldn't necessarily throw in the towel or assume that he has a horrible prognosis. He just told us that he couldn't be successful with direct interactions on the first visit. So that means we go back to the drawing board and we be super conservative. Always better to be super conservative and take things too slow versus too quickly. And right now, if guests come over, it's 2 layers of safety, and we're not getting rid of one of them. Okay. If he realizes that when people come over, they're not going to approach him, they're not going to handle him, they do not become unpredictable, and we're not going to put any social pressure on him to interact with them, he's going to start feeling a lot more comfortable when people come over. So I would get rid of the whole introducing him to people without any safety measures on board, because he just doesn't have the skill set to be successful yet. Let me know if that makes sense.